Uh, I'm sorry for this, Lovaas joins us tonight to talk about female mushroom hunters of Zambia, food, medicine, and livelihoods. Mai really gets around. When we exchanged messages on April 29th, just 3 weeks ago, she was in Brisbane, Australia, then to San Francisco for a day before leaving to attend the Thinking with Plants and Fungi conference at Harvard. Back to San Francisco 2 days ago for this event, and Santa Cruz tomorrow. Mai is from Norway. After moving to California, she began her study of plants and mushrooms at the Berkeley Herbal Center in 2012 before doing her master's work in global health at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. Mai first learned of mushrooms in Zambia from David Aurora and was able to parlay that into 2 extensive stints of field work there for her thesis in 2022 and 2023. Please welcome Mai.
Great, thank you for the nice introduction. I'll go straight into it, and no.
I see.
While we're setting up technically, I'd like to give a shout out to Carol Reed for this fabulous hospitality table she's done for us.
Fun. I love to try a new recipe that I just learned, so you're all guinea pigs.
That's good.
Yeah, it turned out well. Not easy to make.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so I was actually I didn't go to Zambia with David Aurora, but him and Wendy have been there several times. And it was at the Thanksgiving foray at David Aurora's house that I learned about mushrooms in Zambia. I actually had no idea. And I found this book called Mushrooms and Mycology in Zambia, written by these 3 Finnish professors that I think was published in 2012. So that was my introduction to mushrooms in Zambia. And then I just forgot about it. And I thought, well, maybe one day I'll go to Zambia and check out the mushrooms. And when I went to Norway in 2018, I'm just coming off of living 6 years in Norway, I decided to do my master's at the university there. And I actually interviewed several graduate programs asking, can I study mushrooms in this program? And I found the global health program where they said, sure, you can study, plants and mushrooms, because it's global health is an interdisciplinary field. And so I will say that my master's probably is their motto was that they're going to sort of have a multidisciplinary approach to solving the world's global health problems. So I would say it's at the intersection of global health, women's health, ethnomycology, food security, environmental studies, and probably a few other things. The project that I did was I went to Zambia to learn about the experiences of the women who gather mushrooms there. So it was going to be a qualitative study. It was going to be interview based. And I actually had to postpone my project an entire year because of COVID. And I did this master project for me. I didn't go to grad school to get a diploma. I was like, if I'm going to do this, I want to study something that's really fun, that I'm going to enjoy. So I held off a year, and while everybody graduated, I went to Zambia to do my fieldwork. Of course, I wanted to be there during the rainy season, which is December through March-ish. So in January of 2022, I went down there, and this is what flying into Zambia looks like from the air. This is just sort of an image of sitting on the 11th floor of my hotel room in Lusaka, looking out and not knowing what's going to happen, because it was actually really challenging to try to set up anything in advance prior to going down to Zambia. I had to sort of just go down there and trust that I was going to be able to do the project that I wanted to. My professor in the program my global health professor had been doing several research projects in Zambia. So he had 2 supervisors for me that were at the University of Zambia. So I did have a contact, but setting things up ahead of time was a bit challenging. And I learned you just have to be on the ground and meet people. So I was sitting in Lusaka, which is the capital of Zambia, and I looked out the window and I'm like, I have no idea what's going to happen. So where is Zambia? It's in southeastern Africa. It's right in the middle. It's a landlocked country. I forget the name of this gap right now that goes into Zambia, but that's basically due to colonialism and the Belgian conquerors sort of taking a big chunk of Zambia there in the middle. I would say that I'm glad I went to Zambia. It's a fairly peaceful country. I don't know that I could have done my project by myself the way that I did it in some of the neighboring countries. There's a bit of upheaval and unrest, but Zambia and Malawi are fairly peaceful.
What's the language there?
They have 73 different languages because it consists of 73 different tribes. It's a country with 20 million people. It actually has a lot of land still where the open forest. Malawi, that's east of Zambia, is a much smaller country and much more densely populated. When I do this talk in Europe, I say it's the same size as France, but here I say same size as Texas. And it's at a plateau, so it makes it slightly cooler than a lot of the other neighboring countries. The Zambezi that the country is named after is Africa's 4th longest river. And out of the 73 different languages, 7 of them are official. 1 of them is English. The main export of Zambia is copper. They have a huge mining industry, a lot of Chinese mining companies, but the biggest are Canadian and Swiss. There's a lot of transport through the country. The Copper Belt Highway, the Great Northern Highway, that are these paved roads that have these trucks, long trucks that carry the copper, and they're very heavy, and there'll be these really deep ridges in the pavement, making it a little bit dangerous to drive with a regular car, especially during rain. And during this time of year, it rains a lot, and when it rains, it's very heavy. So here are my 2 supervisors, Margaret and Namkolo from the University of Zambia. I will say in retrospect that I'm actually really glad that I came in through the health way with these women, and I don't know that I could have had the same results as I had I gone through the forest department. They have the forestry department in Zambia that sort of would have been the natural way to go. But since my project was a global health project, I got to meet people in a different way, and I'll talk more about that later. The sort of, from my understanding, the main pathway for women to have a career in Zambia is to become a nurse, and then you go to school and become a midwife, and then you do your master's, and then you do your PhD, and then you get to teach and be a professor and work in university. I did several sort of trips on my own after the main data collection trip, which was up in Solvesi. It was a 12-hour drive. We got up really early in the morning. And this whole trip, by the way, the 10 days in Solwezi in the northern part of Zambia was set up just in a couple of days after I met Namkolo and Margaret. They called the health post coordinator in Solwezi, who was Namkolo's graduate student. She set up all the interviews because she's connected with the health post organizers in the villages in the northern province in the Solwezi area. So I was told, well, we have 10 days. You have 2 interviews a day, one before lunch and one after. We were going to get a driver. We got a car. I was sort of a little bit worried when I saw this car because it has a snorkel, because Zambia gets flooded in the rainy season. And there's, you know, the roads become rivers and there's crocodiles everywhere. So in the rest of Africa, the animal that sort of kills the most people or tourists, you know what animal that is? It's the hippo. But in Zambia, it's crocodiles because they have so many. In the rivers in Zambia, they say that the crocodiles are sort of lining up like sardines in a tin can, because they're just, if you fall in the river, it's not a matter of when, like if you'll be eaten, it's a matter of when you'll be eaten. So I was a bit worried, but I'm still here now. So all right, so why southeastern Africa? There's of course mushrooms in other parts of Africa as well, but the Miombo forest is a special subtropical forest that gets a lot of rain during rainy season. And it's a forest that primarily exists of trees in the Fabaceae family, so the pea family. Isoberlinia, Gilbernardia, and Brachystegia are these 3 main trees that are ectomycorrhizal. So they're going to produce the sort of classic edible mushrooms that they eat in Zambia. And I sort of, was looking for compound leaves, you know, drive-by mushroom hunting, looking for the compound leaf structure. Compound leaves. And this is actually from Mutinondo Wilderness, which is a really nice sort of private reserve forest, protected forest, also in northern Zambia. No logging allowed, no burning for charcoal. So it's fairly intact and has a lot of mushrooms. But this is actually where I went after I was done with the field work, just to be on my own in the forest, because as I did my project, I couldn't really go into the forest near the villages on my own. I had to have a guide, a translator, someone to come with me. But at Mutinondo, you can go out hiking on your own in the Miombo forest. All right. So Miombo forest isn't just in Zambia. So Zambia is here, but it's right in the middle. And then there's Miombo forest in southern Tanzania. There's also a good chunk in, well, what used to be called Zaire, which is now Democratic Republic of Congo. You have a good chunk into Angola. And then down in Zimbabwe and in Mozambique, the Miombo forest goes all the way down to the ocean. So that'd be interesting to see what grows there. And then in Malawi and Tanzania. So we started driving north on the first day of the field trip. And we saw a bunch of kids by the side of the road selling mushrooms. This is Lactarius cubensis. It's a mushroom that's found all throughout season. It's a brown little, well, they're not Lactarius in Zambia anymore. They're Lactifluus. And they rely on the forest for a variety of materials. So it was also sad to see the deforestation that's happening in Zambia at the moment. A third of the Miombo forest has disappeared between 1983 and 2011. That's largely due to farming and charcoal burning. So in Zambia, they cut the trees in the Miombo forest to make charcoal, which is the main way they cook food. They cook food with charcoal from the Miombo forest. As well as the mining industry encroaching on land. And this is in the Copper Belt. This is the Copper Belt Highway here. And can you guess what kind of mushrooms these are? So they're chanterelles. They're very colorful chanterelles. The Miombo forest actually produces a lot of mushrooms that, if you know mushrooms here, you'll recognize a lot of them there. They have a lot of the Lactifluus and the Russulas and the amanitas, and they have a variety of boletes and swillis, and of course the chanterelles. So these are just, this is the health post coordinator in Solwezi, and this is also another friend that I made when I was in Chapata, who helped me with doing translations and guiding into the forest. I was also told to wear a chitenge when we go to the villages. It's this colorful skirt that you can buy along roadsides and in markets. This is Florence to the left here. She was a key person in Solwezi, the health post coordinator. So this is an interview that I did driving for 2 hours and 45 minutes on these ridgy roads, sliding around in the mud because it was raining a lot. And we were under a straw hut, and I had told the women to collect both mushrooms they eat as well as the mushrooms they don't eat. During my stay in Zambia, I interviewed 160 women total. I had thought that I would do mostly one-on-one interviews, as you do in a qualitative study. You sit down with one person and talk, but what I found in Zambia, that dynamic didn't really work very well. But when the women came together and we had these group discussions, anywhere from 8 to 10 to 15 women, there was lively discussion, and they were feeding off of each other and remembering things. And I don't think anybody had been there before me to interview about mushrooms. You know, I sort of would introduce myself and say I'm from Norway and it's very cold and we have these mushrooms there. And, you know, but we hit it off, you know, right away. So mushrooms is a universal language. I went up. So when I was in Solwezi, it's mainly Kaunda tribe. They speak Kaunda language. I was also did interviews in the eastern province around Chapata, that's Nyanja. Tonga is the tribe around Livingstone, which is in the south. Lunda is also up north, and then Bemba is around Lusaka and up the Great Northern Highway. And I would sort of ask all sorts of questions like, how old were you when you started learning about mushrooms? Who taught you? How many species do you know? How many do you eat? What are your favorite mushrooms to eat? How do you prepare for food? How do you cook them? What about medicinally? And also the livelihoods, the women sort of selling mushrooms by the side of the road, which was an important, they would collect mushrooms for the house, but it was just as important to sell by the side of the road, giving them a good chunk of income during mushroom season. I will also say that in the beginning, the reason I gathered these women is because I knew before I went that it's primarily the women who gather mushrooms for food and medicine in Zambia. And in the beginning, there were, you know, some guys sitting in the background, and I didn't really think much about it, except when there weren't any guys at the back of the room. They just spoke much more, and they were much more lively, sharing a lot more. So I started actually requesting that there be women only in the room, and if men showed up, I would sort of kindly ask them to leave. And that's when I found that the women really opened up and shared about their practices. And here's also from Solwezi in a little chapel. Here's also in Solwezi, they didn't have any fresh mushrooms, so they brought the dried mushrooms. The first time I came to the village in Solwezi, I was actually met by a long line of women clapping and singing a song when I arrived. And they would also if I asked them, one of my questions in the interviews was about mushroom songs. So they also would sing, and they have incredible voices. So that was very beautiful. This is from the Tonga tribe in Livingstone, which is called, so they have the wet Miombo forest, and then there's I guess it's called less wet, rainy Miombo forest. So I didn't actually expect to find much of mushroom hunting in the Livingstone region of Zambia because it's drier, but it was actually very much alive, and actually less trees cut in the southern part of Zambia. I did one interview where I was in an area where I wasn't planning on doing interviews, and I was asked, do you want to go do an interview in this village? And I said, and there was a male staff at the place where I was staying, and I said, well, ideally, I'd love to do an all women's interview. And he said, I can't do that. Like, that's not going to happen. The chief is going to be there. And I said, that's fine. You know, we'll go. And it was a great, lively conversation about mushrooms, but none of the women spoke. I asked several times, sort of prompting them to speak, and it was the guys who were talking. And men learn about mushrooms too from an early age, but it's the women that sort of continue doing it as adults because they provide the food for the house. This is in Chipata with talking with the women who sell mushrooms on the streets. So if you don't pick mushrooms yourself, but you want to be a mushroom saleswoman, you'll buy it from the gatherers. And Chipata borders Malawi and this forest reserve. So the women will go down to the border and buy baskets of mushrooms from Malawi. And these are, of course, also chanterelles, the colorful, abundant chanterelles.
Do they taste the same?
Yeah, each species has different flavors, just like here, but they're absolutely delicious. Chanterelles. So when you're of a certain age, grandma says, okay, let's go. It was very exciting. I was always looking forward to picking. My grandmother was the guide in the forest. The grandma, the mothers, the aunties will take the kids out, boys and girls, into the forest from when they're 4 or 5 years old, and teach them everything they know about the forest. And the women shared that they really loved it when grandma took them out into the forest. It was they have the best time. It's also seen as important to teach young girls about mushroom hunting, because then they can have an income later in life when they need money. A lot of these women, when they go out to pick mushrooms, they will go at 5 a.m, and then when it's raining so hard, the mushrooms just pop up, so they'll go back to the same spot at 2 p.m. and pick mushrooms again. This is also a lady. This is on the road near Kabwe. She has a mushroom called the Amanita lusii, which in Bembo language is called tente. Of course, when I interview these different tribes, all the tribes will have different words for each of the mushrooms. So I recorded a variety of vernacular names. So the women have a lot of knowledge about the ecology in the forest, and although they don't use sciencey terms that we do, they have a very thorough and deep understanding of the forest, which trees the mushrooms grow under. They can explain all the features like the cap and the stipe and spores. They'll say powder. They just have different words for them, and sometimes they couldn't even explain, but they said, they showed me 2 different mushrooms that I actually couldn't tell apart, and then they said, no, this is different from this, and this one is poison, and just look. Because of the deforestation, sometimes they have to travel really far to be able to pick mushrooms. When I was up in Solvesi, they would ask their husband to ride with them on a scooter into Congo and go pick mushrooms in the southern part of Congo to come back to sell by the side of the road. in the Miombo forest, the grass can get really tall. And sometimes the grass is really thorny. They get scratched up. There's a lot of snakes. They reported on snakes sort of swinging themselves from tree to tree in the Miombo forest. Or there was a lady who said she was out in the forest picking mushrooms, and then she could, from a distance, she could see the tall grass just parting itself, moving towards her, and she knew it was a giant snake, and she had to kind of step closer to this other tree and just kind of wait for it to go by. I did ask, has anybody ever gotten bitten while picking mushrooms? And they said, no, never by when we're picking mushrooms, but at other times we have. They also have, they have a lot of mythology about mushrooms. They use it to teach their kids about sort of morals, I would say. One story is about a girl who lived with her grandma, and her grandma said, don't go out at night. And then she did anyways, and she met a guy. And then she got sort of cursed to be an Amanita mushroom, a tente. And when she got back to her grandma's house, her grandma said, oh, you've been cursed to be a tente, an Amanita lucii. Now you have to stay inside and you can't go out during the day. You can only go out at night. And this girl had her lover, and one day he lured her to go out into the sunshine during the day, and she melted right away. Which is the moral of the story. Listen to your grandma and all that. But also the tente, the Amanita lucii, is a very delicious Amanita mushroom, but it's very fragile. And once it comes up, you have to eat it the same day because it's very highly perishable. And then they sing to each other in the forest so that they can know where each other is. They have stories they tell their kids. Really beautiful songs. Of course, all of this is an oral tradition. Nothing really is written down amongst themselves. And they're part of the reason why the guys aren't sort of the mushroom gatherers when they grow up is because of the division of labor. They go to the fields, and then the women are responsible for the house and cooking and gathering. And because Zambia has a long dry season, it gets very hot at the end of November before the rains, 45 degrees Celsius, very dry. And right before the rains come, they stick their seeds in the ground to grow their crops, such as cassava and sweet potato and peas and beans and potatoes. And from when it starts to rain for the next couple of months, while they're waiting for their crops, they actually rely on mushrooms for food. It's a big food source. They eat something called nashima, which is it's a maize. I wouldn't really call it corn, but it's a white starchy maize that they grind up into sort of a porridge, and they eat that with whatever greens they have, pumpkin greens from their crops, and cooked mushrooms.
Is that maize fermented?
No, not that I'm aware of. I don't know too much about how to make nashima. I just know that it's sort of a meal that they mix with water and boil usually for, well, half an hour, and eat it with the cooked mushrooms and the greens. And they say that it's some mushrooms they love because they taste like fish, and some mushrooms they love because they taste like meat. And so it's fish and meat substitute. And they really love mushroom season. They really look forward to these flavors. So it's an important part of their diet. And of course, into these villages, they're poor villages. They don't have money to buy fish or meat. So they rely on mushrooms for food. A bowl of mushrooms, approximately 30 kwacha, which is about $1. If they find the large Termitomyces mushrooms, they can charge 50 kwacha, which is a little bit more. Overall in Zambia, they gather and eat about 15 to 20 different species, which if we go to Zambia, we'll look at a lot of mushrooms and say, but we can eat that, or I would eat that, but they don't. They sort of have only a few that they eat, although they could be eating a lot more, but they don't. And in Kaunde language, the mushrooms they don't eat are called kinsa. And so when I said, gather the kinsa too, I want to see, they thought, oh, well, why would you want that? And we don't care about the kinsa. We walk right by, and they said, no, bring it. They love going mushroom hunting. When you go out into the mushroom forest, you leave your problems on the steps at home. They will wait for you when you get home, get back. So there's no point in taking them with you. You have to go looking for mushrooms with an open mind. If you don't and think about work, you will meet snakes. Because it's not a given that they enjoy, I mean, they work a lot. They have many children, and they gather mushrooms for food, but they also, several of the women said, you know, even if I have plenty of mushrooms at home on the counter, I'll still go out and look for mushrooms. Because I'm only with the forest when I'm there, and I really enjoy being out in the forest. Yeah, and they look forward to mushroom season all year round. They long for mushroom season. This is a lady also in Solvesi. She has some dried mushrooms here, not sure what they are, and also some Lactifluus. So this is kinsa. This is what they don't eat. Show me what you don't eat. So we see some Amanita species in here. There's some Lactarius. There's a variety of other things. There's a bolete something down here. When they pick the mushrooms, they don't bring sort of a perfect specimen with the stalk and the, you know, all things intact. They tend to pick things off. So before you know it, they've peeled the cap layer off, or they've taken the stalk off, or broken it in half. So I wanted to identify everything, and I just didn't have time to even try to look into it. And by the way, there's not really any great ID guidebooks for Zambia. There's the mushroom book that I talked about called Mushrooms and Mycology in Zambia, written by the Finnish professors. And they also released just a couple of years ago, one that's more for the wider Miombo forest, but it's still not extensive. And I would try to look things up, and I don't know what they are. They weren't in the book. But if you know, of course, if you know the families, then you can sort of have a sense. Here's also some more kinsa, maybe a Russulas. There's an Amanita. Yeah. In Norway, we love the yellow Russulas. I would have totally eaten this. They don't. This is one of the really safe mushrooms in Norway. You find a yellow Russula, you're like, okay, I can definitely eat this. This is also a Lactarius. I don't know which one this is. Don't eat it. This is the Amanita pudica, which is they have so many Amanitas. They're really beautiful. They're very vibrant in color, all sorts of color scheme. They also have different versions of the sort of the Amanita cesaria and that kind of varieties. I think I know which one this is from David Aurora. Otherwise, there's also a lot of Amanitas I wouldn't know about. I don't even think this one is called Amanita afrospinosa anymore. I think it's changed since I was there. There's a lot of white Amanitas, and before, when I read up about mushrooms in Zambia before I did my field work, I found writing that said that there's not really any poisonous mushrooms in Zambia. So in Norway, we have the death caps, and we have the Cortinarius rubellus, and we have they're sort of really poisonous mushrooms, and they don't have those in Zambia. And I also read that they had done a lot of testing of a variety of white Amanitas without finding poison. In just the last year, I've read that that's not really true, so I don't know. They don't really eat the white Amanitas, but from what I understand, most of the ones they have tested aren't poisonous, don't have toxins. Some sort of Russulas, some sort of boletus, they don't eat. To me, they look edible. I don't know, beautiful also. And here's a variety of dried mushrooms that are perhaps hard to identify. And then we're back to the Lactarius cubensis. It rains so hard in Zambia, so that when the rain spatters into, if there's a sandy ground, the mushrooms can get really sandy. So that's a little bit of a tricky thing eating mushrooms in Zambia. You'll always have a bit of a crunch. The Lactarius cubensis is delicious. It grows all season. They also eat it raw. Sometimes some women also said that they will boil it to boil out the dark color. And when it goes clear, that's when they'll eat it. This is, again, the Lactarius cubensis. It's very easy to identify. It's very abundant. There's the Amanita luzii that I talked about with the girl who melted. She was this mushroom. And yeah, it's a beautiful mushroom. It gets very large. At the market, you want to buy it as sort of the bun size. But it's delicious even when it's fully grown up. Normally, mostly in Zambia, they boil the mushrooms. Wherever I went, whoever I asked, I said, how do you cook the mushrooms? And they say, oh, we boil them with onions and tomatoes and salt. And they boil for an hour or 2 or 3. And they only, mostly from what I understood when I asked, was that they boil one kind at a time. So one species at a time. They don't mix them like we do. And I was a little bit apprehensive. I thought, oh, this is going to be boring. But then I tasted some of the stews they make, because when you cook it for that long, and they don't really even cut it into, they don't slice them up like we do either. They maybe cut them in half, maybe quarter. And so they're cooked for a long time. And I have to say, it was absolutely delicious. Mushrooms have been cooked for 2 to 3 hours. One species only was just gave it a different flavor experience. The Amanita luzii, they also take the cap off and put salt on it and grill it over the fire. I took it to someone's house and we did a beer batter with it. We made a batter from beer and fried it, which was really delicious. And it doesn't have any of the sort of fishy taste of our cocoras or vernicocoras, anything like that. Isn't that right, Wendy? Yeah. Here it is again. It's huge. And yeah, when you see it on the side of the road, you of course pull over to pick them. And the chanterelles, they have a variety of species of chanterelles. I don't always necessarily know all the names. Yeah, chanterelle is not sure. I mean, I tried. Miomboensis, Semoenzii, Afrosibarius, Adaensis. Yeah, there's more. They have these tiny little brightly colored red ones that you find on the ground. They're absolutely delicious. They're slightly bigger, orange neon colored ones. They're also lovely. The ones that are red up top and orange underneath. And then some of the bigger species are more the sort of classic lighter yellows, cream colored stipes that we're used to from here. All very good. Oh, what did I do now?
So what are the medicinal claims?
We'll get to that.
Oh, okay.
And there's no claims. It's only what they tell me. Yeah, because it's an interview study. So I just go by what they tell me. I don't, they don't.
Is this a matrilineal culture?
Sorry?
Do the women have more power over the men?
No, I wouldn't say that.
What about the inheritance?
I don't know.
Do they have anti-venom for the snakes?
Not that I'm aware of. Maybe in the hospital, if they can get to hospital in time. This is driving hours on dirt roads away from towns and cities. I think I need a little bit of help again because I touched the video thing. That's probably, oh, here we go. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, so I said they boil for with onions and tomatoes for hours. Some mushrooms are grilled, but not that many. Generally, they like to boil them. There's also drying them and or smoking. Sometimes that can be the same thing because the humidity in Zambia is so high during rainy season. There's so much rain, torrential rain, and it's hot. It's, in the 90s Fahrenheit. So I tried to dry mushrooms when I was there, and it was impossible because they just get humid right away. So, which is unfortunate because some of them would give me bags of dried mushrooms, and by the time I came home, they were already kind of molding. And if they dry them over the fire, then sometimes they get smoked and they get a little charred. So it's kind of a tricky thing. Yes.
Maybe you just answered it, but how would they dry them normally?
Yeah, they would dry them out. They have these large plastic bags that the maize meal, the nashima comes in. So they'll lay it out to dry in the sun, and then they try to pull it in when the rain comes, or they'll dry it on the grid over the fire, and then they get smoked or burned.
So is this a soup that they're, when they're boiling it?
No, it's not really a soup. They add just a little bit of water. So I would say it's more of a stewed mushrooms.
A carbohydrate or anything?
Yeah, the nashima is the carbohydrates. This white cornmeal, maize meal paste. I got us, so the health post coordinator in Solwezi invited us all to dinner, and this is her version of cooked with onions and tomatoes. These are Lactifluus. They're cut in half and stewed with a little bit of water. So there's not a lot of liquid for several hours. Very nice.
Onion.
Sorry?
Is it onion?
Onion and tomato.
Onion.
Onion, tomato, and salt.
Why the salt?
Well, you have to flavor it. They have salt, so they put it on for flavor. So this is a meal that you wouldn't really see in the villages. This is something that I got in when I got invited to dinner. So the white paste to the right is the nashima, the maize meal. And then up from that, you have cassava, then you have a chili. Then the two to the left are the greens they eat. So pumpkin greens or any kind of greens off the veggies that are growing in the ground. Then the mushrooms, and then village chicken, which is a more bony chicken. And then the fish, they love fish. They have a lot of freshwater fish. They only eat freshwater fish. They don't have saltwater fish, to my knowledge.
Do they have cassava there, not?
Yeah, they have cassava. But the nashima is more common. And they love nashima. They eat it every day. Which is very tasty. It's like a starchy maize, and then you scoop up the sauce from the mushrooms and the greens and everything. So this is an example of the dried mushrooms. They put it out on the maize tarps to dry with varying results. The split gill mushroom, the Schistophyllum commune, they also, if they see it during dry season, because it shrivels up during dry season, they pick it during dry season. And I also imagine if they do find it fresh, it's an easier mushroom to dry because it dries so easily. They will reconstitute it, rehydrate it, and then pound it, mash it, and mix ground nuts in, which are peanuts, and onions and tomatoes, and boil, and it turns into this kind of mush. And I had it, and it was absolutely delicious. So when I'm turned around on split gill mushroom now, it's delicious. Yeah, so this is also, you can see they're putting mushrooms over the fire, smoking, I would say smoking the mushrooms. And they didn't really slice them up thinly, they're chunks, so they don't dry, right? And so they tend to also kind of put them on, whenever they find them. So some here are fresh and then some are more dried. And the other thing with mushrooms in Zambia, so when I asked about poisonings, like do you experience mushroom poisonings, they would have stories. But from kind of my impression when I heard these stories was that it's not necessarily that they've eaten a lot of poisonous mushrooms, that they're poisoned by toxins, but because they tend to pick mushrooms in either plastic buckets or plastic bags or store them in plastic bags. And because it's so hot and humid, the mushrooms go bad very quickly. And some of them can be they go wormy quite quickly. So I think my impression is that a lot of the poisonings are from eating bad mushrooms that have just gone bad. And so I did my best after a long day of interviews and coming back to my motel in Sulawesi. I did my best to sort of try to identify what I had in front of me. But these are both two very popular edible mushrooms. They're both Lactifluus, and they're they're similar-ish, but obviously this one has wider, thicker gills. But these are both the Musefu and the Vanime in Koanda language are very popular edible mushrooms. Then they also have the way they distinguish between poisonous mushrooms and edible mushrooms is that the male mushroom is the poisonous one. So it doesn't have a name. It's still a kinsa, the non-edible poisonous mushroom, but it's the male. So they show me, see, this is the male, this is poisonous, this is the female, we can eat the female. And same thing with here. Delerama is the one they eat, and then the Munime is the husband, which is poisonous. And they're both Amanitas. Again, the male is the husband, is poisonous. So yeah, I was trying to figure out what things are here.
Is that the book from the Finnish?
This is the book called Mushrooms and Mycology in Zambia. And the main author is a woman named Maria Herkkönen. She's Finnish. And she's retired now. She's in her 80s, but she's done a lot of ethnomycological work in both Tanzania and Zambia. And that was the only book that was available when I went down there. Now there's also another book. Okay, so what do they eat also is the Lactifluus volumoides. This is a easily recognizable mushroom. It has milk that is red, then turns purple, then black. It's very delicious, and it can be quite abundant. It's a firm mushroom, so they tended to just break it in half and boil it. They also gather Termitomyces, which are the termite mushrooms, and the Macrolepiodas. They have different species of Macrolepiodas. They immediately take the skin of the cap off, and I asked why. They said because it's bitter, it'll turn it bitter if you don't, and then they pick the stalk off. And then they would bring it sort of with just the cap.
Do they wash the mushrooms at all? Or they just put them directly in the stew?
They wash them very thoroughly. They have these buckets with water, and because they said a lot of the mushrooms tend to be quite sandy, so they have a way of kind of washing them around, and then the mushrooms float up to the top, and then the sand goes down to the bottom, and so they do that several times. It looked to me like they got most of the sand out, sort of very efficient. This is a Macrolepiota that she took the cap layer off. I was able to take a photo of it before she did that. You know, they just kind of crunch it up, the stalk and everything. Anybody recognize this mushroom? This is the Amanita rubescens. And from what I gather, when I was there looking at the books that I had, it's called Amanita rubescens. It doesn't really have its own species name. So, I mean, it doesn't look like the Amanita rubescens that I'm used to. I think there's multiple species, but which one, I don't know. It's edible. They eat it. They peel the cap layer off.
It has a red staining when you get here.
Yes, no, it definitely has red staining. Yeah. So yeah, this is also a favored amanita. I don't remember the name of this, but this is what do you call it? A gas?
Hyphaeus.
Yes, thank you. So they eat this. Also, I had this fried. It wasn't too bad. It was a little sour. I only really found that they ate these in one region, up north. Where do they find? They find it in the ground.
But like, do they rake or like?
No, they're visible. They pop up. You see them as yellow sort of neon balls on the ground. Yeah, and it has kind of a little bit of a kidney feel, texture, smell to
You know what
them.
kind of tree it's with?
Huh?
You know what kind of tree it's with?
I don't know that it's ectomycorrhizal, if that's your question. I don't know.
Like, what is it called?
Does that have a milky juice?
No. Not that I remember, not that I recall.
Maybe a recipe.
But I do remember seeing this in my book. I just can't recall what it's called right now. So I think it's fairly common and it has a name. And so this is the Termitomyces. So I'm not going to lie. I came also to Zambia because I was curious to see this giant mushroom that is cultivated by termites. It's a very large mushroom. This girl is selling it by the side of the road and she probably gets $2 for it. 50, 60 kwacha.
What do you mean it's cultivated by the tree?
I'll get to that. So it's a sought after mushroom because it is very tasty. I've eaten a lot of mushrooms, but it's just very good. It's very, I don't know how to describe it. It's got that perfect mushroom flavor, not too pungent, not too mild, but somewhere in the middle. Great texture, great with butter, great boiled. Just very good. It comes up extremely quickly. It like bursts out through the termite mound. And then you ought to pick it that day. Here, this one is, the cap has broken because it's so heavy. They can get really thick. So they sort of fold over on themselves. And yeah, we pulled over side of the road when we saw this. They only come early in the season. So if you do want to go to Zambia and try to find them, you should be there within the first few weeks of rain, which depending on, that could be anywhere from early December to early January. There's about 40 different species-ish now. They also grow in other parts of the world. They grow in Asia, different species, Livelihoods family. And this is a termite mound, and driving around Zambia, you see termite mounds everywhere. They're not necessarily all active because the termites at some point will leave the mound. How come there's so many termites or mushrooms? I don't know why there's so many termites in Africa or termite mounds. You know, they
don't eat wood, so they're not like our termites.
Oh, yeah, they thrive there. They at some stage in the year, in their cycle of the year, they get wings and fly. And you can hear and see them flying through the air. During that time, they sort of have this they have this honey-like nectar inside of them. I think that's for reproductive purposes. I'm not entirely sure, but the Zambians collect them. You can even catch them by the wing mid-air, pluck the wings off and eat it. And so it's a delicacy there. They eat the termites fresh because it tastes like honey. It's crunchy. It's got protein. And
even the termites here, when they're, I'd say, it tastes good. It tastes like, you know, I think of them as like, well, some kind of seed. Yeah.
I mean, in many parts of the world, people eat insects. It's a great protein source and they're abundant and it's, you know, sustainable harvest. So why not? And you can also find them in the markets dried and various other insects dried. You reconstitute them and cook them. I mean, you rehydrate them. The mushroom, the termites, it's sort of a very intelligent housing structure. They have a symbiotic relationship with the Termitomyces mushrooms, which means they depend on each other. So they cultivate the mycelium at sort of in the bottom of the termite mound. The termites will go out and gather wood and bring it back to the Termitomyces mycelium for it to digest the wood so that the termites can eat it. And the termites don't actually need to grow the mushrooms. They just want to live with the mycelium of the Termitomyces inside the mound. But of course, when it rains really hard during mushroom season, the mushrooms pop out of the termite mound. And if you pick a termite mushroom, you will also, if you pull it up gently, you will also pull up the long taproot that extends all the way down to the bottom of the mound. It can be a very long taproot. These are Termitomyces titanicus, the biggest one. I put my sunglasses on for scale. I caught one slice of this mushroom and I had enough for dinner, basically. Again, sadly, I wasn't able to dry this successfully to take with me. And they sell them by the side of the road during the beginning of mushroom season. This is Termitomyces reticulatus. It's a different species, also very tasty. They also have a very tiny Termitomyces that grow sort of in hundreds of them in clusters. And you may not actually see the termite mound. They'll just be on the ground, but they have a specific features so that they're kind of quite easy to identify. This is actually when I went on a safari in South Luangwa National Park, and I told my safari guide and the ranger was required to come with us on the safari drive. And we drove outside of park boundaries to look for mushrooms because in Zambia is a very mycophilic society. You can talk to the cab driver in Lusaka. You can talk to people in cafes, at the grocery store about mushrooms, and everybody has a relationship to mushrooms, usually from their grandma or their auntie picking mushrooms. So they go to the market. Mushrooms are a delicacy during season and they can be quite expensive. So mushrooms are revered by people. And so when I said I'd like to go see for mushrooms, they said, sure. So the ranger would go out with his rifle and kind of look around for elephants and lions. And he said, it's okay, you can come out. And so we found these amazing termite mushrooms. They do. They grow in elephant dung.
And is that part of their mycophilic kind of, is that part of the culture or is?
No, not to my knowledge. So when I went down there, I only interviewed the women, and when I asked about medicinal mushrooms, they didn't bring up this psilocybe or the other genuses that have psychedelic properties. So from what I gathered, no, and I didn't interview this sort of medicine men or any of those people. There's also medicine women, but I didn't talk to them, so I don't know. But they're there. Yeah, they grow in various dung. And
The master's thesis for someone else.
I know. Yeah, anyone? They're hugely understudied in Africa. Yeah.
There doesn't seem to be a lot of herbivore damage on these mushrooms you're showing us here. Do they have, the various critters around that they eat the mushrooms too?
Yeah, the snakes love to eat mushrooms. The snails, deer will eat mushrooms. In fact, what they told me is that when they do find the big Termitomyces mushrooms, they like to tap the top of the mushrooms with a stick, because a lot of the time there can be a snail coiled up around the stem of the mushrooms, or there's a deer laying there sleeping underneath the termite mushroom. So here you can see the long taproot. And this is one of the smaller Termitomyces that are also very abundant, and they're delicious. And then I sort of asked, so do you use mushrooms for health problems? And three main mushrooms came up that are not ectomycorrhizal, I would say in that sense. They're two polypores and a guild mushroom. And they would find these year round, and they would sort of have a cabinet, a medicine cabinet of the medicinal mushrooms.
Are they treating any cancers with mushrooms that you know of?
No, I don't know of that. They didn't say anything about that.
Yeah, it's fascinating when doing research on bladder cancer, the mushroom actually breaks down the cell of the cancer cell,
Yeah, there's a lot of
the wall of the cell.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the split gill mushroom, as you know, is also eaten as food, and they say, so what do you use this mushroom for? And they use it for the treatment of diabetes, low blood pressure, or what came up with all these three medicinal mushrooms is that they use them to treat women's health issues, gynecological issues after childbirth, and other ailments too. I sort of asked, well, how do you use how do you prepare the mushrooms generally? And it's anything from making a tea or burning the mushroom and using the ash to mix with either oil or salt and ingesting it or applying it externally. The other one is Pycnoporus sanguineus, which I think there's some people call it the Termitomyces sanguineus, the Pycnoporus, either one. It's a strikingly red mushroom that appears on dead logs, very easy to see. Again, they also use it to treat diabetes, then usually as a tea. They drink it for low blood pressure. One of the things that I didn't ask about, because they have these health posts all over this area, especially in Sulawesi. And I didn't sort of ask, well, do you use the mushrooms because you don't feel like you have access to health care, or in addition to the services you get at the health post clinic? But they all sort of told me about extensive uses of these three different mushrooms. They will treat their kids with earache or ear ringing. So they'll make a tea and then curl up a leaf and put it inside the ear of the child and do 3 drops into the ear. They also will mash it up and mix it with oil and apply to pinworms. They will use it for diarrhea. Again, they had this several times. They talked about how they will burn the mushroom first, then grind it up and mix with salt and either ingest it or apply topically, or oil. And they also talked about how they will put this mushroom in the mouth and kind of put it on top of the toothache, or suck on the mushroom, and that would help. Here it is again, very strikingly red. And then there's the Ganoderma boninense, which is, last time I checked, a collection of about 14 different species. Also used for a variety of health problems: cough, sore throat, canker sores, heart palpitations, high blood pressure. There was a woman who said she had a very stressful time in her life, and she had to go to hospital, and she had so many things to deal with her husband and the kids. And she said, I came home from the hospital, I sort of pounded up some of this mushroom, and I was able to roll it into like a cigar and smoke it, and it really helped with my anxiety. And they also like to sort of burn it ceremonially in their house to ward off evil spirits. They like to put this mushroom in the bags of the maize meal to help keep bad evil spirits away. And it's also, they use it as a love potion. I asked, how do you make the love potion? They said, oh, we're not going to tell you that. So I don't know. Okay. I'm not going to go that much into the environmental change, just a little bit to say that, of course, Zambia, like a lot of other places, is affected by environmental change. They say that they don't have the amount of rain that they used to. There's less mushrooms than before. The rains used to come at the Independence Day in Zambia, which is October 24th. Now it tends to come much, much later. and be a shorter season. So, yeah, they don't have access to mushrooms in the abundance that they used to. And of course, so they have a tradition in Zambia of cutting trees and making these charcoal burning mounds. So they light fire to the tree, the logs, put them inside the mud, the red dirt, and smoke it into charcoal. And then they bundle the charcoal up and sell it by the side of the road. And it was funny, as I was driving in to do these interviews with the women, there were guys riding their bikes the other direction with charcoal to sell by the side of the road. And I asked, how do you feel about, because they also said that, yeah, the trees just aren't there anymore. We can't go in our forest. We have to go farther away, sometimes into the Congo to find mushrooms there because our trees are gone. And then, when the trees are gone, the mushrooms are gone. So I said, how do you feel? Is there anything you can do? And they said, there's nothing we can do about it because it's a source of income for the families. It's the same community. Sometimes the charcoal burners are husbands. But it can be a major contention between if there's a new family coming in and who's cutting the trees, because the trees are directly linked to the income of the women during mushroom season. But then the men have to make a living too, and this is tradition. There are a lot of incentives in Zambia to try to sort of come up with alternative fuel sources. I don't think anything has been majorly successful yet, but they are working on it. So here's all up the copper belt this is lined with the charcoal, right? So this is lined with dead trees used for fuel. And then Zambia is very flat. I was only in one region in the east where there was tiny mountains. And then so I was surprised when I was in Solvesi and I saw it's a mountain, the first mountain I've seen across the cornfield. But if you look closer, of course, it's not a mountain, it's mining deposits. And this continues to be an increasing problem. They say that, a lot of our mushroom forest is not there anymore because of the mines. They keep expanding the mines. The fences are being put further and further into our land, and we have had zero compensation, like nobody's given us anything. And if our kids try to go near the fence to gather mushrooms, they get arrested even if they're not up to the fence, and then we have to pay the fines. We can also see the creeks coming down from the mines. They're polluted and it smells. I know that there was a study in the copper belt done some years ago where they looked at the heavy metal content of mushrooms in a specific area, and it was very, very high. So that's, disconcerting.
How about plastics?
Heavy metal in the mushrooms, because the mushrooms take up the heavy metals from the mining industry.
Yeah, were these transnational corporations?
Yeah, the mining companies, yeah.
They're all over the world exploiting the entire planet. Sorry to say.
Yeah, in Africa, there's a lot of, all the mining companies are, I shouldn't say all because don't know that for sure, but the biggest mining companies in Zambia are all from abroad. And it's sad when you're there because you can see how there's an extraction going on, and I question how much is given back to.
There's no ecology department in their government?
Yeah, I'm sure there is, but the mining industry is also income for Zambia, and Zambia is actually one of the better off countries in the region. Like I said earlier, they don't have a lot of upheaval and unrest like some other neighboring African countries, and they actually produce a lot of food that they sell to the neighboring African countries. But the mining industry is these mining companies got into Zambia a long time ago, and so they're established now, and it's big income. So you can't just tell them to leave.
And how does the metal get into the mushroom?
Mushrooms generally tend to take up heavy metals through the water, through the soil. Some mushrooms have larger uptake than other mushrooms. If the ground is heavily polluted, anywhere, you shouldn't really pick the mushrooms in that area because they tend to absorb heavy metals in
So
general.
when they're mining, the metal goes into the water and the air. And then
Yeah,
it
and
goes
the
into
ground.
Soil,
Yeah, yeah.
it goes into the soil through the air, right? Like, how does the mining?
Yeah,
how
I
does
mean,
it
I-
get
in
into
this-
the Soil.
In this area in the Copper Belt where they did this study, it was formerly an area where there was a lot of traffic due to mining. So maybe there was residual waste and things like that. I'm not entirely sure. But it definitely gets into the ground and the soil. And I don't mean to end on a sad note with that, but it's something you see when you drive around Zambia. It's very obvious, and it's quite shocking how when you see these giant mining deposits, like right coming all the way up to the highway. But there are, still some good forested land in Zambia. So I hope that it doesn't get worse than it is, and that potentially there can be sort of a turnaround and finding other ways for, generating charcoal for fuel, which is also a big problem. And yeah, I don't mean to end on a sad note, but I do want to end with this lovely lady holding a Termitomyces, and yeah, say thank you, and I hope you all get to go to Zambia. Thank you very much.
Questions?
I know there was a study a while back that I read that was talking about different species tend to absorb heavy metals differently, and albatrellis and agaricus were some of the ones that are most, I guess you say, absorbative. And
Yeah, I didn't, speaking of agaricus, I didn't see a lot of agaricus in Zambia. It's interesting going down there. There were sort of genuses or families I didn't see at all. Like I didn't see any tricoloma. I saw Cortinarius once. So which species in Zambia would absorb more heavy metals? I don't know. I think it would be interesting to do a bigger study on that in Zambia because it's so pertinent because of the mining industry that's really very present there.
I know there was quite a bit of French studies of Africa, at least Lactifluus and Russulas, I think. There are a couple guys that did quite a bit of several books available.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not good. Yes, Wendy.
Yeah, please. Agaricus there. It's like almost like yes, agaricus,
Mhm.
and the locals there didn't eat it, but we did, right?
Oh, great.
Yeah, and then they just told me that the yellow kind of mushroom.
Yeah, the yellow ball.
It's called
Lucia?
Mycoamaranthus.
Mycoamaranthus.
Amaranthus.
Mycoamaranthus.
The one that is a rubescens.
Yeah.
Amanita congolensis.
Amanita congolensis. Great. Yeah. The Amanita rubescens is the Amanita congolensis. Yeah.
I have a question about the beginning of potentially valuing these mushrooms because of that trans kind of highway. Do you think some influence came from other places that kind of supported the income and the gathering of it? Like, could you document like historically when, and then you say grandmothers and things, but that could be a 40-year-old person.
Yeah. I didn't document that in this study, but for sure their grandmas weren't still sitting by the side of the road selling mushrooms. This is all in recent decades where there's these roads are now so heavily trafficked. And with the infrastructure in Zambia is several of the highways are funded by the European Union and US aid, probably not anymore, but was then. And so they keep building these big highways to go through the country so that they can transport copper up to into the Congo and into Tanzania. And so there's just more and more of that, I would say. So it didn't used to be like, but that's certainly interesting to look into. When did that really start? Because it didn't used to be that way. Yeah.
And I had another kind of question. I spent time in Tanzania and they had actual small craft industry for growing mushrooms. Did you notice that?
Yeah. It's something that a lot of people do to have extra income and it's becoming huge now, is to grow the oysters, to cultivate mushrooms. So that's also a separate thing that's not traditional, but that has come in, and it's a growing industry, and they start selling to restaurants. There's also, I tried to find some information on this, but it was very limited, I heard, because the mushroom cooperatives or collectives are very secret, but there are collectives where women will gather mushrooms that are shipped abroad. But it's very hard to find information on that. Yeah.
So when you were talking about the forest and you were mentioning how many different countries that particular forest went through, would you happen to know if those other countries, Angola, Mozambique, and Congo and Tanzania, are also mycophilic?
Oh, that's a great question. My guess is yes, because if they have access to the Miombo forest with plethora of amazing, abundant edible mushrooms, my guess is yes. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't actually know. I know that there's these Belgian researchers that have been in the Congo documenting mushroom picking, but I don't recall them saying anything about it being a mycophilic country. And there's also an ethnomycologist, a woman working in southern Tanzania. Actually, in Tanzania, I think she would describe it as a mycophilic country. I mean, I would imagine so. Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of going off of the generational question, just in general, do you ask them or learn anything about like the mushroom picking? Did it go back like many generations, or like or
Yeah.
somewhat new, or?
No, as long as
Mhm.
they can remember, it's always been like this kind of thing. This is what we've always done. And I also ask, is this something you're going to continue doing even when it's hard to access these forests and mushrooms? And they said, absolutely, we're going to teach our daughters. This is very important knowledge for food, for enjoyment, and also making a little money is very important.
So it seemed like it seems like generally from what you talked about, it's them eating the mushrooms isn't just a subsistence measure. Like I feel like a lot of other countries you'll see like people eating mushrooms because they don't have other food, and so they kind of resorting to that. Instead, it seems like they prefer it, that they go out and looking for it.
Yeah, I think it's all of it. It is subsistence. They do rely on it. They love eating mushrooms and they love picking them, and they long for mushroom season. And they just light up and sing songs and tell stories about these mushrooms. Yeah, in the
December to March, right?
yeah. Yeah, in the north, maybe even a little longer in the north of Zambia. Yeah.
What you said, it sounds like that recipe for mushroom stew is fairly simple.
Yeah.
The mushroom, onion, the tomato, what is it?
Do you know oil, really? Just a little bit of water.
And salt, pepper.
No pepper, just a little salt, put the lid on, let it cook, simmer for 2 hours, and then try it. Try one kind of mushroom and yeah, single species. Yeah. Yeah.
Two quick questions. One, do they ever cook the mushrooms that they sell on the side of the road? Or is it only just fresh mushrooms that they sell?
All fresh.
All fresh, okay.
From what I found, I didn't
Sure.
see that they were selling dried either.
And what is your favorite thing that you learned? However you want to interpret that.
No, I mean, I learned a lot of things. I have to say I was a little bit apprehensive, like I'm a white lady going into Africa. I'm like, hey, tell me about mushrooms. And it's, technically not my tradition. And so I was like, how's that going to be? I found that they really opened up. And once I made it a priority to have only women there, I just felt like I saw that their faces lit up and they opened up and shared a lot of things. And the fact that I was very enthusiastic about what I found. And I think they saw that, and it was sort of this connection that we had, and that somebody listened to them about what they had to share about their lives made a huge impact on me. And when I left, I was like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And, I had my recordings and all my notes, and I left, and they were literally running after me with cassava sticks, like, push this is the ground when you get home, and here's some greens for you. And here, have this, with what they gave me a chitenge, like the skirt, like, have this. So that was something that was, had a huge impact on me that I will always remember. Yeah. I did, and I don't have any with me, unfortunately. It's a sort of a project to edit the videos I have. And
YouTube plays a song for gathering mushrooms in Cameroon.
yeah, there's I'm sure they have traditions in lots of other African countries, not only Miombo forest, but other parts of Africa too. Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
An amazing presentation. And thank everybody for coming. We can use help gathering the chairs.